They erased your memory, but your soul still whispers the truth, and that truth lives in the pain you were never allowed to name. It knows when your heart races in a silent room. It knows when your hands shake without warning. It knows when your tears fall for no clear reason, in moments that should feel safe, and deep down, a part of you knows too. What if your deepest pain didn't begin in this life? What if the wound that shaped your voice, your choices, your fears, was carved long before your first breath? You don't remember the moment, but your body does. It remembers through tension in your shoulders. It remembers through the lump in your throat when you speak your truth. It remembers in the way you pull away from love, just when it feels most real, and maybe you've tried to reason with it. Maybe you've told yourself you're just overreacting, but the ache didn't come from nowhere. It's the echo of a story buried beneath the surface. Too old for language, too sacred for logic. What you call anxiety might be your soul trying to remember. Have you ever felt a pain that didn't belong to this life? If so, write in the comments. I've felt it too. This isn't dysfunction. This is signal, a vibration that's been trying to reach you quietly through the skin of your present life. If you've ever felt a sadness that doesn't match your story, if you've ever woken from a dream with a heartbreak you can't explain, if you've ever sat in stillness and sensed that something important was missing, something hidden just beneath awareness, then this isn't the first time you're hearing this. It's the first time you're allowing yourself to remember, because some truths don't need to be learned. They just need to be re-felt. And the pain that keeps showing up isn't asking to be fixed. It's asking to be heard. So we begin not with explanation, but with listening, not with answers, but with presence. Because your soul hasn't forgotten. It's just been waiting for you to feel what your mind was never meant to carry alone. But memory doesn't always live in your thoughts. Sometimes it hides in your skin. The body doesn't forget when pain outlives the memory. There's a moment, maybe in your childhood, maybe last week, when your body flinched before your mind could catch up. No threat, no danger, no memory that explains the reaction. But your breath went shallow, your muscles tensed, your heart started racing like something was chasing you. And you asked yourself, why am I reacting like this? But what if the body wasn't reacting to the now? What if it was remembering something your mind was never allowed to keep? The body doesn't operate on timelines. It doesn't know the difference between a wound from this lifetime and one carried through lifetimes. It stores frequencies, sensations, patterns, not in words, but in reflexes, not in thought, but in response. Pain doesn't always start with injury. Sometimes it starts with silence, and silence repeated across generations becomes instinct. This is why you recoil from kindness that feels too sudden, why love makes you anxious, why success feels dangerous. It's not that you don't want these things, it's that your nervous system remembers what happened the last time you reached for them. And maybe that memory didn't come from this life. Your biology, like a sacred archive, carries the unspoken, the betrayal you never saw coming, the goodbye you never got to say, the fall from a cliff your feet have never touched, but your spirit still fears. You've seen it before, you just didn't know how to read it. You see, your healing won't always come from understanding the past intellectually. It begins when you start believing the signals your body has been sending all along. Because the shaking, the shutting down, the sudden grief, they're not signs of weakness. They're traces of lives lived, of traumas endured, of stories that want to be completed, not erased. What if the anxiety you call a flaw is really your body warning you that something unfinished is still echoing? What if the resistance to joy isn't resistance at all, but a protective rhythm patterned long ago? This is how the body loves you, by remembering what you can't, by keeping you alive even when you don't know what you're surviving. And once you learn to hear it, not silence it, the remembering begins. And when the body remembers what the mind has erased, the soul begins to whisper. Spiritual amnesia, why you chose to forget before being born. There's a reason you don't remember where the pain began, not just because time has passed, but because your soul made a choice. Before you entered this life, this body, this timeline, you agreed to forget. Not as punishment, not as loss, but as protection, because some lessons can only be learned when you walk through them as if for the first time. Some truths can only be embodied, not remembered, and love, in its highest form, must be chosen again, without the comfort of memory guiding every step. The ancient mystics called it the veil, a soft, sacred forgetting placed over your soul like mist, not to blind you, but to let you rediscover what never stopped being yours. And in that forgetting, you were given space. Space to explore pain without bitterness. Space to meet fear and make different choices. Space to awaken, not just to who you've been, but to who you could become. But what if the most powerful truth was hiding where you never thought to look? Not in your mind, but in your reactions, your longings, your quiet griefs. You didn't forget because you were weak. You forgot because remembering too soon would have interfered with your growth. The soul knew that only through contrast you would seek meaning, and only through seeking would you remember. That's why a smell can unravel you. Why a stranger's eyes can stop your breath. Why a place you've never been feels like home or warning. The veil doesn't mean you're lost. It means you're on the journey. A journey designed not to give you all the answers at once, but to deliver them in rhythm with your readiness. And here you are, hearing this now, feeling something you can't quite name rise in your chest. That's not new information. That's recognition. Because the soul doesn't really forget. It just waits for resonance, for stillness, for the exact moment when the body is quiet enough to let the memory rise again, not as trauma, but as clarity. You've been carrying truth in your bones this whole time. And the forgetting? That was just the beginning of the path back home. Pause for a second. I'd love to hear your thoughts so far. Just drop a comment. What part hit you the most, or are you starting to feel like this message was meant for you? The invisible saboteur, how forgotten pain creates present self-sabotage. There's a moment, maybe familiar to you, when everything starts going well, and instead of relaxing into it, you pull back, you feel uneasy, you begin to doubt, you question whether you deserve it, you make mistakes you swore you'd never make again. And then, just like that, what felt like progress slips through your fingers. It's easy to call that fear of success, or low self-esteem, or bad timing, but what if what you call sabotage is actually a memory playing itself out through you? A memory not held in your conscious mind, but woven into the rhythm of your reactions. Not logical, not visible, but real. Because the pain that isn't seen doesn't just disappear, it becomes a pattern. A script written in the ink of experience your current self has no access to, but your energy still follows like a map. And you repeat it. Not because you want to suffer, but because part of you believes suffering is safer than joy. Because at some point, in some life, joy turned into loss, love turned into betrayal, freedom ended in punishment, and your system remembers, so you keep yourself small without meaning to. You walk away from people who get too close. You abandon dreams when they're almost real, not because you don't want them, but because something inside you whispers, it's not safe, not yet. That whisper isn't weakness, it's protection. It's the invisible saboteur, born from forgotten pain, keeping you within the boundaries of what once felt survivable. But here's the truth that begins to shift everything. You're not reliving the same story because you failed. You're reliving it because a part of you is trying to rewrite the ending. And that part doesn't need blame. It needs acknowledgement. You've seen this pattern before, maybe in your family, maybe in your relationships, maybe in how you always stop just short of receiving. You didn't invent this loop, you inherited it, and now you're the one who can break it, not by forcing change, but by remembering the origin, by meeting the sabotage not with shame, but with sacred attention. Because every time you catch yourself pulling back from what you actually want, that's not failure. That's a moment of recognition, a chance to choose differently, to pause, to breathe, to whisper to that old fear, this time, it's safe to stay. Distorted teachings. Why positive thinking alone doesn't heal soul wounds. You were told to raise your vibration, to focus on the good, to repeat, I am healed, I am whole. As if speaking, the light could silence the shadows. But what happens when the shadow doesn't leave? When the affirmations don't touch the ache? When you smile while something inside you quietly crumbles? There's a wound deeper than mindset, one that can't be painted over with positivity. Because the soul doesn't respond to performance, it responds to truth. And truth isn't always pretty. Sometimes it's raw, messy, grieving. Sometimes the most sacred thing you can say is, I'm not okay. You've seen it before, the spiritual bypass dressed in poetic language, the pressure to be high vibe, to move on, to just let go. But the soul doesn't let go because it's told to. It lets go when it feels safe. And safety doesn't come from pretending the pain isn't there. It comes from being present with it. What if you didn't need to fix your sadness, but listen to it? What if your darkness wasn't a flaw, but a sacred place holding a memory your light hasn't reached yet? Ancient teachings never asked for forced joy. They asked for integration, to feel all things fully, not to reject the parts that don't sparkle, because rejecting the wound doesn't make it disappear. It makes it louder, more hidden, more insistent. Positive thinking is not wrong. It's just incomplete. Like putting flowers over cracked earth, pretty on the surface, but the roots still thirst. Healing begins where truth begins, and the most honest truth is this: your pain has value. Your sadness has intelligence. Your resistance is trying to tell you something. What if the next time you felt broken, instead of repeating a mantra to be better, you simply said, I hear you? That alone, that moment of recognition, begins to rewrite everything. Because you're not here to fake your light. You're here to reclaim it from the places it got scattered when you were told your feelings were too much. And once your truth and your presence meet in the same space, the soul starts to breathe again. Energetic echoes. Why some places or people awaken. Unexplainable emotions. There are moments that leave no explanation, only sensation. You walk into a room and suddenly feel cold, uneasy. You hear a voice and your chest tightens like a memory has just entered, even though you've never seen that person before. You touch an object in a store and your eyes fill with tears, but you have no idea why. You chalk it up to being sensitive, too emotional, too imaginative. But what if it's not imagination? What if it's resonance? There are frequencies, places, people, even sounds that match something buried deep in your soul's archive. Not because they're triggering trauma from this life, but because they're vibrating in sync with something your spirit has encountered before. The soul remembers what the mind doesn't, and sometimes that remembering comes not as thought, but as feeling. A sudden shiver, a rush of peace, an unexplainable need to run or stay. You've seen it before, you just didn't know how to read it. That's why a stranger's glance can unravel you, why a city feels like a homecoming, why a house gives you chills before you even open the door. We call it intuition, energy, vibe. But maybe it's deeper than that. Maybe it's memory, not the kind you access with logic, but the kind your body feels before your mind catches up. And it's not always negative. Sometimes you feel comfort with someone instantly because your souls have met before. Sometimes you're drawn to a place because your energy once left something sacred there. Sometimes a scent carries you back, not to childhood, but to a lifetime your current eyes have never seen. Modern life doesn't teach us to trust these moments. It tells us to explain, to dismiss, to move on. But ancient wisdom and your own inner knowing whisper something else. They tell you to pay attention, to pause, to notice what your spirit is reacting to even when there's no reason. Because that no reason may be the exact reason your soul brought you here. So the next time something or someone moves you without explanation, don't run from the feeling. Let it sit beside you. Let it speak in the language only your heart can hear. And if something in you is remembering, write in the comments, "I've seen the signs." Tell us, because your story might be the mirror someone else has been waiting for. Neuro-spiritual link, how the subconscious remembers through symptoms. There are aches you've carried for years that no doctor can explain. Fatigue that arrives without warning. Insomnia that resists every remedy. Tightness in your chest when you try to speak what matters. A sinking in your stomach when someone gets too close. You've tried medication, meditation, logic. Still, the symptoms return, not always loud, but steady, unrelenting, like a whisper you can't quite hear, but can't ignore either. What if that whisper isn't a malfunction, but a message? The mind forgets to protect you. But the body remembers in its own language, and science is finally catching up with what ancient teachings have long known. That trauma, especially the kind you don't remember, isn't just stored in memory. It's stored in tissue, in posture, in reaction, in the rhythm of your breath when you hear a certain name. The subconscious doesn't use words. It uses symptoms. It speaks through the migraine that arrives before you speak your truth. The tension that tightens your jaw when you feel unseen. The dizziness when you're about to step into something new. It's not random. It's not weakness. It's remembrance, and not just from this lifetime. The soul moves through lifetimes like breath through lungs, unseen, essential, and constant. What doesn't get resolved in one form will seek expression in the next. You've seen it before, in the way your body rebels when your mind wants to grow, in how your energy dims around certain people without ever understanding why. And while psychology can name the pattern, it often can't name the origin, because the origin might live in another layer of your being. This is the bridge, where neuroscience meets soul memory, where healing isn't just about mindset, but about vibration, about listening to the body as sacred text. When you stop pathologizing what you feel and start revering it, you open a doorway. Not just to relief, but to remembering, because what you call a symptom may actually be a cipher, a message encrypted by your soul, one that says, "You're getting closer, don't ignore this." Practical access, a symbolic ritual to remember without fear. Not all remembering needs to be dramatic. It doesn't have to come through breakdowns or visions or waking up in tears. Sometimes, remembering begins in silence, a silence so soft it feels like stillness, but carries weight beneath it. The soul doesn't shout, it suggests, it nudges, and when you're ready, it offers symbols. Symbols are the language of the subconscious. They are how memory bypasses logic and slips into your awareness like a dream you didn't ask for, but needed. You don't have to force access, you just have to invite it. Sit with a pen in your non-dominant hand. the one you don't use to sign your name or write your truths, the one less shaped by structure, more connected to intuition. And ask your hand to speak for the ache you can't name. Let it write, without grammar, without structure, without editing. You may be surprised what flows, a phrase, a shape, a feeling that doesn't belong to now, but makes your whole body listen. And if words don't come, notice what does. Does a certain animal keep showing up in your dreams? A recurring number, an image, a staircase, a door, a flame? These aren't random. They're invitations, familiar guides from unfamiliar lifetimes. Sit with that symbol, breathe with it. Let your body respond without analyzing. Ask what it knows. Ask why it keeps returning. Not every answer will come clearly. Some will come in tears. Some will come in stillness. Some will come later, in a moment when you're doing something ordinary, like folding laundry, and suddenly feel like you're standing in two places at once. That's how remembering often works. Quiet, patient, unfolding. You don't need to go back to relive the pain. You just need to meet it with enough compassion that it no longer has to hide. And when it rises, when the symbol becomes sensation, you don't have to run. You can stay. You can listen. You can let it be seen without fear. Because remembering isn't about trauma. It's about trust. The Crystalline Archive. What ancient teachings say about soul memory? Long before data was stored in devices, there was a belief, passed through temples and tribes, that memory lives not just in the brain, but in the very fabric of existence. Not metaphorically, literally. The earth, they said, remembers. The Akashic records, the crystalline grid, the salt of the oceans, the roots of the trees, the bones of the mountains, all holding echoes of what has been lived, felt, lost, and learned. Your body is part of that archive. Crystals in their silence store frequency. Their structure holds more than beauty. It holds code. This is why you're drawn to them without knowing why. Why holding a stone can calm your nervous system. Why a certain gem feels like it's been waiting for you. It's not new, it's remembered. And you, the one listening, you've touched this knowledge before. Not in this lifetime, maybe, but somewhere, in a body that looked different, with eyes that saw the same sky. You've walked through temples where salt and sand were treated as sacred carriers of spirit. You've spoken prayers into stones. You've buried fears into fire. You've encoded memory into matter. And now, in this life, you feel the pull back to that wisdom. And still, the modern world tells you to forget, to doubt, to rationalize, but you feel it, don't you? In places where the air feels heavy with something ancient, in symbols that speak before you understand their meaning. In tears that rise when you read a single line from a sacred text, as if your soul just recognized an old friend. You've seen it before. You just didn't know how to read it. These aren't fantasies, they're frequencies, remnants of knowledge that never died, just went dormant until you were ready to access them again. And you don't have to be a mystic or scholar. You just have to be willing to feel. When a crystal warms in your palm, when a dream delivers a forgotten image, when a silence feels full instead of empty, that's the archive speaking, not with facts but with energy, not with proof but with resonance. Because the soul doesn't keep records like a library, it keeps them like a song, one that plays faintly beneath everything until the right moment, the right place, the right vibration brings it back into harmony. The memory isn't lost, it's just waiting for resonance. Not everything you've forgotten is gone. Some memories live just beneath the surface, waiting not to be chased but to be met, not through thinking, through resonance. And resonance doesn't demand proof, it asks for presence. If you've carried a pain that never made sense, If you've sabotaged moments of joy and couldn't explain why, if you've cried over stories you've never lived and places you've never been, you haven't imagined it. You've remembered it without realizing. You were never meant to remember all at once. Only in pieces, in sensations, in symbols, in sudden waves of knowing that rise from places deeper than the mind. The ache in your chest, the tremble in your hands, the pull to something ancient. These are not problems to be solved. They are messages, maps, reminders, because your healing won't come by erasing the past. It comes by reintegrating it. The memory isn't lost. It's been waiting in your bones, in your breath, in your longing for answers that sound more like whispers than declarations. Your soul didn't forget. It made space to choose again, to feel again, to become something not despite your past, but because of it. And maybe that's why this message found you now, not to teach you something new, but to activate something sacred you've carried all along. Some truths don't need to be found, only refelt. And if something in you is remembering, write in the comments, "I've seen the signs." Tell us if you've ever felt this kind of pain with no name, because your words might help someone else recognize their own. If this message touched something deep in you, let us know. Leave a like, subscribe to Echoes of the Path, and watch the next video waiting for you. It holds another piece of what you're here to reclaim. This is not the end. It's a beginning you've always carried within you. You weren't supposed to forget everything, just enough to come back by choice. If you felt this, you were meant to. If you're still here, it's because part of you already knew, and you're not alone anymore. You never were.